Okay, welcome to episode 6 of the Salience Project. My name is Alec.
I'm Alexi, and we have our guest Tatiana again.
Hi.
Tati, or
So,
just Tatiana?
just a little bit about
Oh,
what the
whatever.
Salience Project is. We discuss tools and protocols to improve people's salient skills. Saliency is the detection. Saliency detection is considered to be a key attentional mechanism that facilitates learning and survival by enabling organisms to focus their limited perceptual and cognitive resources on the most pertinent subset of available sensory data. Our goal is to help people build internal relationships with their inner voice, learning to decode yourself by deciphering what makes you feel more like you and what takes away from you. The more data points, the better. We are conscious of the bottom-up sovereignty that is created from more salience and orients behaviors towards long-term reward circuitry. We focus on mindfulness and discipline to help us make better choices. And our hope is to build an interoceptive habit, or help build an interoceptive habit for our viewers and listeners so that they can create meaningful change in their lifestyles and behaviors and become more optimal versions of themselves and more comfortable in your own skin. We focus on the conceptual pattern of being into doing into becoming, character traits that you identify with that help you plot the course of your own life. Recently, we've been talking about identity and the purpose behind understanding who you are and where you come from and how you resonate with the world and your different place. In this episode today, we're going to talk about self-esteem. So it's a huge topic that I think dovetails right from identity. And it's one of the basic needs that we have as human beings, to be able to feel loved and to know that we are comfortable in our own skin. So, you guys want to add anything to that?
No.
Yeah, it just came to mind. So when we were talking briefly before we started, you mentioned Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and you spoke about self-actualization. And what occurred to me is that a person can be self-actualized, yet have low self-esteem. So self-actualization does not necessarily mean that you can have high self-esteem. In fact, I can think of a couple of people top of mind that are very successful, right? And in others' views, they can be self-actualized. Perhaps even in their own view, they are self-actualized. However, in their inner world, they have very low self-esteem, which is why you see people like Kate Spade, like what was the guy that had that chef show? Oh, he was so famous.
Emerald Live? No.
No. The man
I
that
know
committed
The guy that died?
travel show.
The guy that died?
He killed himself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can't remember it.
And in my opinion, one of the greatest comedians of all time.
Oh, yeah. What was his name? Robin
Williams. And he was self-actualized, right? He was one of the greatest comedians, had fabulous shows, had great stand-ups. And in his inner world, he was deeply depressed and had very low self-esteem. He used his humor as a way to cope with himself feeling like he was always falling apart. So self-actualization does not necessarily equate or correlate to high self-esteem.
Now, do you think that so what you're arguing for is that you don't need to have high self-esteem in order to self-actualize? That's what your argument is, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. And
Okay.
I would also say that people that have lived very turbulent, chaotic, traumatic circumstances can have low self-esteem. Like, let's say somebody that lived in a country where there's been a lot of war, right? Like
Venezuela.
Correct. That has caused them to have low self-esteem because their government, their culture, their society told them, you don't matter. We don't care about you. They come to the United States and they can have self-esteem, but work towards being self-actualized by being able to cover their basic needs like food and things like that. And it can be
Security, shelter, water.
right. And it can be an evolution of self-esteem throughout your life. Like you hear all these stories of people that are wildly successful and very wealthy, that are not happy with themselves or do not feel good about themselves.
For example, one person that comes to mind for me is Kanye West. You know, Kanye West went through a series of checking in and out of mental institutions and psych wards. Yet he owns and operates one of the biggest branches of Adidas, and has multi level, you know, Grammy award winning artist, you know, triple platinum, whatever you want to call it. You know, he's wildly successful, but a lot of that has, you know, led to him not really being comfortable with himself and his, you know, where he's at in his life and decisions made XYZ. I don't know the inner stories of it, but that's somebody who I think, you know, fits that picture. Wildly successful, low self-esteem.
Yeah, you can have a lot of self-motivation and drive and have very low self-esteem. And you see that, I think, in social media a lot.
It's a powerful driver, you know, like I guess you could say negative motivation. Like, I'm going to drown out whatever I'm feeling and just work hard and try to do my best and be my best. But it's not necessarily going to lead you to what you should define success in, I guess, right? As, which is being self-actualized and have high levels of self-esteem, but not too high where you're over tipping the balance. And then now you're becoming in the side of cocky, right? And
Now, I think one thing that's important for us to frame, my metrics of self-esteem personally are going to be different from yours, Tati, and are going to be different from yours, Alexi. And I think that's a huge key point, like a huge peephole into the ability to, you know, have higher levels of self-esteem and, you know, feel more comfortable with who you are. If you have proper metrics and things that actually make sense for you.
I also feel like the idea of self-esteem is something that I would say most people don't explore. I would say, I think it would be interesting to go, you know, to a high school and just start asking teenagers, you know, what do you think self-esteem is? And then see what they answer, and then say, and where do you think your self-esteem is? I would say the majority of people would be like, I don't know, I've never thought about it. And then you might have, you know, a few here and there that give you some awesome answers, but I would venture to say the majority of them have never sat and explored this topic.
Tati, I would love to do an experiment with you where we go to high schools and do that. So
I think we should. I think we should, and I think
it'd be good.
Yeah, and that it would be valuable to do. And you know, even if we just stood outside a store and asked people that and said we're doing a research project, I would say adults would. I think we would get some really interesting, perhaps funny, you know, answers. But I think it all starts with the fact that a lot of these topics that you are exploring, even in your introduction, I remember a couple years ago, a friend of mine that has been in wellness and health for a really long time said to me, what you think about all the time and what you think is normal is like a UFO to the rest of the population.
Right.
It's just not what we're given to explore. I mean, think about even just like you focus your attention on learning the topics that a school gives to you. And if you're lucky, if you're real lucky, your parents will expose you to things outside of that, right? But you learn and you focus your attention and you use your brain to learn math, reading, writing, science. Never, ever, ever, even in health class, they teach you some weird stuff. Like, you know, and half the time you tune it out because you can't relate to it. So I just, and that's why I'm so passionate about these subjects, because having worked with children and youth and adults, you know, really, really smart people, really well-educated people, are very unaware of these self-introspection topics.
Right. And I think that comes back to a conversation that we were having a little bit earlier, that you know, it starts with our education system in the household and in the schools.
And pause right there. So with the education system and self-esteem, what does the education system teach us about self-esteem? If you make good grades, you're
a good person.
If you make bad grades, you're
a bad person.
Right. Like, think of our own brother, who's a badass by all means of the word, Derek. If he had based his self-esteem based on his 12 years of schooling, his head should be in a toilet, right?
Right. His head is in a toilet.
His head is in a toilet, but he's making $125 an hour, you know, and has his own thing going on, and he's his own boss, and he created the life that he wanted, and he never wavered from saying, I'm a badass, and I'm a badass, and I'm a badass. Right, although he had some emotional side effects from his learning difficulties, within himself, the wiring that he was born with, he has always had a high self-esteem.
Right.
And that's a whole other thing, right? I'm going to talk about that on my show tomorrow, like the coding that we're born with. Then you have people that are very good in school, that are being told in school, you're good, you're good, you're good, you're good, and get into Ivy League schools and have scholarships and jump off the top of the building when they get to college, because they don't have that intrinsic coding and they haven't had the tools to function in life, right? And you don't kill yourself when you have low self-esteem.
That is so crazy you mentioned that, because that happened to one of my friends. The kid well, I'm not going to say his name, but we went to elementary school together all the way through high school, class president, you name it, got into Wake Forest, good school, great scholarship, full ride, ended up committing suicide.
In college?
True story. True story. In college. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've heard those stories a lot, especially when I saw patients that had attempted suicide, where an outsider would look into their life and say, you have everything anybody could ever want. Like, why? And it has to do with all the things that we're talking about, as a society, and we've allowed, as adults, as parents, as a culture, we've allowed ourselves to move away from teaching children functionality. And I was talking about how students can be very equipped academically with intellect, with high IQs, with cognitive abilities, but if you have cognitive abilities up here and emotional IQ and functionality down here, there's a big disconnect in how a person is going to be able to succeed. And we have to match it, right? And we talked about how schools aren't teaching this, how my generation is the first generation where a lot of households had both parents or both caregivers working, which has led to, and this is not judgment like good or bad, it's just what has happened, where parents have not been available to their children and have been gone a lot and spending very little time with them. So there's been a lot of negligence of the functionality and the emotional IQ importance of teaching children what I call how to be human, and how that is now propagating where we are with this culture of us versus them, what did you call it, Alec?
For me, it boils down to a major disruption in our ability to make sense of the world.
Right. Yes, exactly. Like making sense of the world, because there's so much confusion, right? Like even within a household, you can have one parent that is like, you have to get vaccinated, and the other parent that is completely against it and terrified of getting vaccinated. And or one parent that is pro-Trump and one that is pro-Biden, and instead of having conversations about, hey, let me understand your opinion, or let me understand your perspective, maybe I'm missing something, and having constructive conversations, we're having life or death battles with one another.
Absolutely. And I think, part of the issue with that is that we're not teaching our kids how to make sense of the world. And because there is this disruption in the household and this disruption in the school systems, we're not equipping our kids to navigate the world safely, emotionally safely, with emotional self-esteem, which is the topic of our conversation today, with psychological tools in order to navigate stresses and tension, with ability to communicate what's going on inside of them. Suicide rates are above and beyond where they need to be, especially.
I actually read a statistic yesterday. I have it right here because I'm going to use it for the radio show tomorrow about that, because I don't know if you remember, but at the beginning of all the shutdowns, I started screaming from the rooftops that this was going to become a huge problem with youth's mental health. And in fact, now we know, and the statistics have come out, and I think, I have one here, but they're really alarming. We have something like,
Go ahead and take your time and pull it up.
yeah,
But
we have like an increase, like a fourfold increase in the amount of teenagers contemplating or actually attempting to commit suicide. And we had a mental health problem before the pandemic. We had a mental health crisis with youth, because of technology, because of social media, because of negligence, lack of attention, because of schools, specifically public schools, also contributing to confusion, and so now what we have is just it's a storm. We have a storm, and we have youth that are living false realities as a result of social media and technology, and have no sense of identity, and their self-esteems are in the toilet because they deem their self-worth to be equated with likes.
Right. Likes or follows or TikTok views or whatever, their metrics are all off.
Right. Right.
And a lot of the issue, one of the things that I read, and I can't remember, and, pull up the statistics and do the research on your own and find the information on your own and make sure it's credible. But I know that there was a rise in domestic abuse cases, in my city and in different parts of the country because of the shutdowns. And I really do think that it took a toll, not only academically on the students, but on their social skills and their ability to, see their friends and hang out and be kids. And, they're isolated in their homes, and their homes might not be the best places for them just because there might be tension or whatever. And it was a big issue. And I really do think that, from the top down, people made decisions without taking into account all of the side effects or negative benefits.
Yeah, it was a reactionary thing. And as we know, anytime we react, we usually make decisions that are
Right.
we're going to regret. Yeah. And
Absolutely.
unfortunately, the ones that are paying the highest toll. So the research is showing that kids are like, the schools are not going to be recovered from this for a decade. And kids, depending on how much, there's so many things that come into play on if kids are behind or not. But like some parents hired tutors during the lockdown when kids weren't going to school, so that kept them at the level they needed to. Some parents couldn't afford to do that. Some parents needed to continue to work, and the kids were just home by themselves, fending for themselves. But we have
we as adults, as
leaders, have a responsibility to this youth that has had trauma. It's trauma, just like children that live through war. It is traumatic what our children have lived through. Their life was ripped out from under them from one day to the next, and we've been in it for 2 years. So a child that is developing and can barely make sense of the world, you do that on top of it to them. And so we all have a responsibility to work together, collaborate, build bridges in these hot topics that are making us so contentious towards one another, so that children learn that we do have a country and a society where people work together. That's how we've gotten to where we are. But if we do not pick up the pieces, we are going to be in shambles.
Absolutely. And I think, speaking to your point, it's the next generation that's going to take leadership roles, and it's the next generation that's going to take responsibility for all the mistakes that the previous generation made. And I definitely see that right now. A lot of the part of this project is us wanting to, and I say us, us wanting to do better with what we have and provide more for those in need. It's not about us trying to, blah, 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 get as much information out there. It's about us helping equip others with the information that we didn't have.
And that goes back to like the internet and what we were talking about at the beginning. But so there's a problem, right, with too much information, that it's that people don't know where to start. So when you have, it's like with boundaries when you're growing up, when you don't have rules and you just have unlimited access, that can be as confusing as having restriction. So I think that there's something valuable in having something organized for people to use when they're seeking resources, because when you're in crisis is when you seek resources, or hopefully you do. But that's when you're the least able to think objectively. That's when clarity is gone. So, which is unfortunate, because most people seek out, mental health assistance or coaching because there's something that has happened, right? Even in sports, like, oh, my coach told me I need to get better at this, or I won't be able to play. Well, that's when you seek out private instruction, when really you should be seeking that out all along as a way to be proactive.
But essentially, it's a boat with sails, right? So if the boat at the bottom has holes in it, which is, the boat at the bottom is identity, self-esteem, self-worth. It doesn't matter how big the sails are. It's going to drown. It's going to sink.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so that's like using that model. It's like you have to make sure that the base of the boat and the foundation is solid. Right. Using those tools that we were talking about, emotional intelligence, ability to problem solve, ability to communicate, ability to feel, ability to understand who you are, et cetera, so that when you do have these massive sails, communication, a powerful network, education, ability to access resources that other people don't have, ability to take out loans, whatever you want to call it, now you can move in a direction where you want to go. But if you undock and your boat has holes in it, it doesn't matter how big your sails are, it's just going to sink.
Like, I would venture to say, I don't know if there's a study out there with this, but I would venture to say that if you put, let's say, a clone, which I think that's so freaky and I hope they never clone people, but let's say that they did clone a person, right? Same upbringing, same household, same everything, except one was only going to school for academic knowledge. That's all they were given, just academic knowledge. And the other one was given emotional intelligence, right? And you had a observation of how, and you made them apply to have the same job, whatever you want it to be, some corporate job. I would venture to say that at the end of a longitudinal study of across the span of time, the person with the emotional intelligence will be more satisfied with their life and more successful than the person that just had the academic knowledge.
I would agree.
That would be.
I would agree. How do we bring awareness to self-esteem, to beginning to ask yourself, how can I begin to change how I look at myself? Like, how do you get people to do that?
It starts with conversations like this. So I always, how do you change processes and behaviors? You start with knowing where you are, right? Where am I? Understanding how you got there, and then saying, I want to be here, and constructing, right, a plan of action from where you are to where you want to be. So if you know that right now you do not feel great about yourself, then you have to understand why. What are the things that have led up to that? And then once you do that, then it's saying, okay, I don't feel good about myself. How do I want to feel? Well, I want to feel, this is my personal thing that I've done. I want to feel motivated to get up in the morning. That's my driver, right? And so what are the things that I have to do to wake up every morning and feel motivated? And so I make a list of those things. And for everybody, self-esteem is different. Some people's self-esteem might be linked to their athletic career, right? And we have to break these beliefs that who we are is tied to what we do. And if you haven't listened to the first episode of my show, I highly encourage you to do that, Alexi, because
Yeah, I will.
it's all about establishing a baseline. And establishing a baseline is knowing who you are. And who you are has nothing to do with what you do. However, most of us tie in how we feel about ourselves to what we
Into what
do.
we do. Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
so like if you ask the majority of people, who are you? They'll say, I'm a mom, I'm a student, I'm a finance person, I'm a trainer, I'm a coach. Those are actions, those are behaviors that you do, but that's not who you are. And so
Hmm.
the foundation of understanding who you are, your identity, not how others see you, because that's a whole different conversation, but how you see yourself and your identity of who your being is, the soul that takes up your body. If you can understand that, then one, automatically your self-esteem is going to be better than it was, because now you have an understanding of this. What is this? This
Yeah.
body. And once you do that, then it's easier to say, okay, I understand where I am. I've made some decisions that I don't feel good about, but those were actions. That's not who I am.
Right.
That's not who I am. Like people that go to prison, you see them, or that have like tragic losses in their life, right? Like their wife leaves them, or there's an accident and they lose everything, or they're faced with a serious illness, and they start to examine their actions based on who they are and what they wish they had done. And so that's part of like coming to peace with, this is where I am right now. I may not like it, but this is where I am. And now I have the opportunity to move towards how I want to feel. Because if you
So,
move towards how you want to feel, that's in being, that's not in doing. But then your doing changes as a result.
right. And so what I'm hearing, Tatiana, is you need to establish a baseline of your identity so that you can build metrics of your self-esteem. And then you can make actionable, mindful decisions on how to benefit your self-esteem so that you can continue to raise your baseline.
Right. And then you're not focusing your self-esteem on others, because you understand that
It's an
although
internal
Alec,
loop.
exactly, that although Alec comes from the same family, he is a different being than me. He's different. So I can't judge my self-worth or my self-esteem based on comparing myself to my siblings, because they are different beings than I am. But I can't do that if I don't know who I am. Because if I don't know who I am, I feel like I am the same as Alec and the same as Derek and the same as Zelig, because that's what I know, right?
Cool.
And you see these dynamics play out in families where one sibling feels like they're not good enough because the other sibling is really good at something. But that has nothing to do with you, right? I can't
Yeah.
play soccer, that's just not what I was. It's not part of who I am. I'm not a tech person, right? I certainly am not a plumber, you know? But I am who I am, and I cheer and I value everything that my siblings are doing because they're honoring themselves in that. I'm not jealous, I want them to be successful in who they are, whatever that means.
Right.
Whatever that manifests
But cool.
into.
So could an exercise for our listeners be like self-affirmations? So like every morning you wake up and you say, I am this, I am this, I am this, and you reaffirm yourself, the things that you are.
The best exercise that I recommend is practice feeling how you want to feel. So if I'm feeling like I don't like myself, imagine what it would feel like to like yourself and start to try and feel that way as a part of your affirmation or as a part of your meditation, because that's going to shift the chemistry in your body, and that's going to shift your ability to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And it's hard for people to shift and change because they're comfortable doing what they're doing, even if it's not good for them.
Right. Okay. I like that, actually.
Yes,
I like that as viewing it as an
Sure.
exercise. Like, okay, cool. Like you go to the gym and you exercise, okay, cool. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to shift the way I view myself. I'm going to shift the potentials in which I have. I'm going to actualize the potential energy inside of me.
I mean,
and
I
know I have to run in a second, but I'll leave you with this. You know how I know it works? Because since Luca was very young, I always told him, just when you go to bed at night, visualize yourself doing whatever it is you want to do. And since a very young age, he's visualized himself being a professional soccer player and by himself, because I have not helped. I mean, I've helped financially and by driving him around, but every opportunity that Luca has found in soccer, he has found it. I've not gotten on the internet and searched and called coaches and talked to other parents. Nothing. I've done nothing. And he has opened every door for himself. And now he's playing semi-pro soccer, and soon he'll probably be playing pro soccer. And whenever I ask him, Luca, what's your plan B? I've done my job so well at teaching him this that he tells me, there's no plan B. I've already seen myself being a professional. I'm already there. Those are his answers to me. And I'm like, shit, I did my job too well. But he's been practicing it so long that in himself, there's no room for anything else. This is who he is, right? And you see it.
That's a powerful place to be.
Right. And he does not, I mean, true or false, Alec, he does not waver from it.
No, he doesn't. There is no plan B.
He does not waver from it. And I've had talks with him, and it's meditation, it's focus, it's affirmations, and that self-intrinsic self-motivation that he was born with. You've known him since he was a baby. He has always had a sense of who he is ever since he was little.
Ever since he was running around in Spider-Man costumes.
Yeah, right? He always thought he was a superhero.
All right.
And that's what he's made himself. All right. I love you. So happy to see you.
Thank you, Tati.
Tune in tomorrow. We'll talk soon.
Yes.
Yes.
Bye.
Cool. Bye.
Yeah,
all right, Lex. You want to add anything to that? That was a lot.
Yeah, no, I was just listening and soaking it in. It was good stuff. But yeah, I mean, I like what she said, like kind of pretend or like imagine yourself feeling one way and then trying to kind of bask in that. And it's like, and you can see it work in like simple concepts like at the gym, like I don't know if you've ever like when you're squatting, and it's like a tough day, like you're dragging yourself and like the weight just feels heavier, But if you can like go in there and be like, and just like talk yourself into like, this feels good, this feels light, like it's going to move quick, it's going to move easy. And then like you get under the bar and you lift it like it's light, and then your squats are much easier. I don't know if you've ever experienced that, but I've definitely played around with that.
I have experienced,
like,
I don't know if I've experienced one day when I'm the next be another day when I'm feeling better, the weight is better, lighter.
Yeah.
It feels easier.
there are days, and I think I feel like I learned to override that, because like I remember one time I was working out, and like in the beginning, like my first round, like same weight, my first round, I was like, man, this is really tough, this is really heavy. And then like in between sets, I had thought about what I heard someone say in the same context that we're talking, where it's like, if you just imagine that the weight was lighter, and just like when you pick it up, you don't really focus on how heavy it is. You just pick it up, you move, and then you go for your squats, and like you really talk yourself into getting it. And like from set to set, it was like a world of a difference on how light the weight felt. And I had already done a rep, and it was a world of a difference, I
Wow.
always remember that, and that definitely helped me. Like when I go to exercise and I go to do things, like I try to talk myself into a more and pretend to be in that positive mindset, that it is easy, that it is going to work, that it's going to go well. And it usually kind of makes it easier to go through.
That's pretty powerful.
Oh, all right. What's up, boss?
You got to go.
I'm about to. Oh, yeah, yeah.
All right. It was good talking to you, brother. I'll chat with you soon, okay?
All right, man. We'll talk soon.
All right.
See you.
Bye. Peace.